Think of those old Battle of Britain movies, you know, with the heavily guarded command post somewhere in London, the pretty young women pushing flags across a huge map, and the generals plotting their next move. Well, maybe that's not exactly what's happening at the Wapping headquarters of Rupert Murdoch, but it's pretty close. Murdoch, quite simply, is at war with the British unions. His immediate fight is with the powerful printers, but if they can be beaten, then it's a big blow against that I'm all right, Jack attitude that has cost the whole of British industry so dearly. In that sense, Murdoch's controversial Wapping plant is not just a building filled with the latest in newspaper technology, it's a symbol of change in a long, sad history of industrial crisis. They call it Fortress Wapping, Rupert Murdoch's printing factory that sparked his war with British printing unions. It's now the front line for an industrial battle to the death. Razor wire, police and armed guards. Outside, the unionists' only weapons are words. Inside, the general is already claiming victory.
They thought they could have me on my knees in a couple of weeks. Those jobs have gone. I warned the unions. I said, you are not going to get in here if you don't take this opportunity. And they didn't believe me.
When Rupert Murdoch first strode onto the hallowed publishing turf of Fleet Street, he walked into the very worst of British unionism. He was the dirty digger, and getting out his dailies became a daily struggle against unions that had never lost a fight. This was the old Fleet Street, liner-type equipment, antique by Australian and American standards, manned by old guard British unionists. And there was no question about who called the shots here. For a quarter of a century, the British printing unions held proprietors like Rupert Murdoch to ransom. When they said everybody out, not a single newspaper could roll off the presses. After years of negotiations, Murdoch said enough was enough. A month ago, he packed his papers and left for this high-tech fortress at Wapping on the outskirts of London. Predictably, the 5,500 workers left behind went on strike. Murdoch simply sacked them all.
People that have been working now for the time for 30 years, I've been working there now, myself, 18 years, he just kicked me out.
Do you think that you've been in any way brutal in all of this?
No, I don't think brutal. It is always hard when you fire a lot of people. But we say we didn't fire them. They went on strike. They broke their contract. We wrote to them about it. Their own union explained this to them, but recommended, nevertheless, take the risk, go ahead and do it. We said, don't take the risk. Please don't do it.
People with the kind of power that he has got, what he's done to the unions in Australia, America, and he's trying to do in this country, we won't stand people like him. We don't like people like him. He's too powerful, he's got too much money. And we are people with principles, we've got wives and children, houses to bring up, and people like him spit on people like us, treat us like dirt, kick us around, like he's done with all these people here.
The unions were literally left out in the cold. The General Secretary of the largest, Brenda Dean, a new face in British unionism, was the only leader to confront Murdoch head-on.
Lies have been told during this dispute. Lies that it's all about highly paid printers. I know it's not, and you know it's not. Murdoch's balance sheet knows it's not as well. He employs 10,000
Dean claims the unions were set up by Murdoch to strike. Do you believe that right from the outset, Rupert Murdoch and his company were having you on when they were negotiating?
Yes, we do now. We do believe that we were deceived by them, that it was gross bad faith. But not only that, not content with just doing that, they then also conspired to provoke a situation where the workforce were to take industrial action, although, in fact, we responded very calmly to much of their provocation.
However conciliatory Brenda Dean and the unions were prepared to be at the 11th hour, what they couldn't make up for was the decades of cosy union deals on Fleet Street.
Well, for instance, the Sunday Times we were paying 560 people in the press room there every night, over £150 for a Saturday night. You could never find more than 60 of them at work at any one time. They quite openly were only working every second night, and the nights they were working half nights, that sort of thing. Right here, when we were trying to get them to work here, they were insisting on 8 people for one position, which is now done by one person, very happily and very easily.
8 people for one position?
Yes, that's right.
Is it fair that people should be paid for work that they don't do?
I don't accept that any of our people get paid for work they don't do. And if they did, Mr. Murdoch's companies wouldn't be as profitable in the UK as they are.
Did the printing unions take management for suckers in Fleet Street?
Yes, but perhaps they were right in doing so. I mean, for years, the management have failed to stand together. If we'd ever stood together for 2 weeks, we would never have had to come to this. But everyone was too busy trying to take advantage of each other. And they let the unions just divide and conquer.
Do you think he's got any principle?
Of course he's not got any principle. How can a man like that have principle? The things he's done, how can he have principles? Seriously, honestly, we're ordinary people. How can a man like that, what he's done to these people, have principles? It's ridiculous.
So determined was Murdoch to beat the unions that he masterminded a plan that would challenge most spy thrillers. The latest in computer wizardry arrived secretly from the United States in unmarked boxes. All Murdoch needed then was a brand new workforce, and he got that by offering his journalists more money and recruiting willing electricians to man his presses. Do you enjoy that cloak and dagger?
No, it was a little bit straining at the time.
But bypassing the militant unions had its price. The minute they agreed to work for Murdoch inside Wapping, his new workers became targets of the old. Murdoch had to set up a shuttle of armoured buses for his besieged staff. He also bought $20 million worth of new trucks to sidestep union-controlled distribution networks. And then there's the security. What can we see here on this model?
Well, we can see, as you said, the pickets. The police only allowed 7 pickets there to stand and shout at the people.
So that's at the very front gate.
In the most violent confrontation since picketing began at Wapping, a number of people suffered minor injuries, but there were no reports of arrests. The pickets accused the police of using unnecessary violence to control the demonstration.
This place, when you enter it, feels more like a cruise missile base than a place that you produce newspapers. Is there anything about that you regret, that it has to be this way?
We all hate it. We want just to get that barbed wire down, and it's a bit like a construction camp too. We want to clean it up and plant some trees and some lawn and make it a nice place of work.
Well, it's known as Fortress Wapping. Do justice to a brand new prison. And we're not used in the UK to have printing factories with barbed wire around them. That isn't any ordinary barbed wire, it's actually anti-personnel barbed wire that you have to have a special licence to get. With closed-circuit TVs looking at you before you get in, never mind when you're inside. With strengthened iron gates, with a security lodge which has bulletproof glass around it. And talk about overmanning. There's 8 men in the security lodge, so you can't accuse just the print area of overmanning. It really is totally alien to the British industrial scene.
Alien maybe, but at this stage, even under siege, still working. Inside Fortress Wapping, Murdoch is there to make sure that his gamble pays off. He and his select group of Australians are pulling the strings in this British experiment.
Do you have any more of these technical problems that you had at the outset?
No.
Not at all?
We're still mastering them all now.
Right.
One by one. We're using less pressure tonight. We're finishing too early. It's going so well.
Yeah.
We finished printing last night before 3 o'clock. So, thank you very much.
Is the Australian style of newspaper ownership different to the British style?
He's different in as much as he's very rarely here. And the problem is that if you've got something you need to discuss, you've got to wait till he comes, and when he comes, he's only here for a day or so. So he's the absent owner. And our people resent that.
Yes, that's said about me. I've lived here for many years, and I still spend a large proportion of my time here. Yes, that's true. I mean, I'm not here all the time. I couldn't take it for 16 years. I would have been like the other proprietors. I mean, they're not here either, but they go and live in the Caribbean or something.
You would have gone mad, is what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, I saw people become bitter, broken old men in the hands of these unions, and one of the reasons that I said, well, I'm not going to base myself any longer here. I'm not going to let this happen to me or to my family.
We do believe that people who own national newspapers in the United Kingdom should either be UK residents and passport holders or Commonwealth passport holders. I don't think that's a very unfair claim to make.
Does the opposition also manifest itself because of your Australianness?
I don't think so. I think it's in some ways an advantage. Being an Australian in England is not as good as being an Englishman. But it sure beats being a Frenchman or a German.
Just as Murdoch's first move into Fleet Street caused a revolution, so did his hasty exit, when his empire turned its back on Fleet Street's old technology and set up its new streamlined operation in Wapping. The rest of London's proprietors panicked. Murdoch's move triggered a most un-British scramble into the 20th century. Murdoch's reward for leading the charge off Fleet Street is establishment admiration at last. Do you think you deserve that dukedom that one local writer suggested you did?
Oh, sure.
Why do you think you deserve it?
That wouldn't interest me.
That leads me to the issue of one Samantha Fox, who is amply endowed and who, according to the front page of The Sun, was pointing her bazookas towards Wapping. Now, is that all part of the PR war?
No, that's just part of the fun in The Sun. I mean, they turn everything to their advantage. And they got Samantha Fox, this model, to come in an armoured car through the picket line.
Did you approve?
I thought it was all right. I mean, she was very amply dressed at the time. It was all right.
Change the presses tonight.
Murdoch appears to have pulled off the impossible. His newspapers, including the venerable London Times, are rolling out of Fortress Wapping as though Fleet Street were ancient history. But they're rolling out from behind barbed wire. If you believe Rupert Murdoch, there's no stopping the presses this time. Will you ever allow those print unions to come into Wapping?
No, never. No. We have other people here now, other unionists, who are doing a wonderful job. They're working night and day. They're taking a lot of abuse, sometimes a lot of threats at home, and we're not going to let them down.
We'll stand here, we'll try and stop him, and even if we don't stop him, we'll still stand here and try and stop him, because people like him in this world have got to be stopped.
Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9 Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.